Speaking English with an accent is a bit of a controversial topic. On one hand, I see people online promising you to make you speak English like a native speaker. On the other hand, I see the opposite end of the spectrum. People who say things like, don't worry about your accent or even your pronunciation. As long as people are able to understand you, that's what matters. Look, my personal view on this lies more in the middle. I believe that yes, you don't have to try to speak like a native in order to be considered a good speaker of English as a second language. But I also believe that you shouldn't be sloppy and lazy when it comes to improving your pronunciation and even your accent when speaking English. So, on the agenda today, we're going to cover the problem I see with this speak like a native narrative. Also, the problem I see with this don't worry about your accent narrative. We're going to define accent and pronunciation. What is the difference between these two? Then I'm going to present to you the 4 different types of accents that you can have as a non-native speaker of English. And finally, I'm going to end the episode by giving you some tips to improve your pronunciation and even accent in the English language. Are you ready? So let's get started. Hey there, how's it going? Thiago here, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. In case you're listening to me for the very first time, this podcast is intended to help intermediate and advanced learners of English communicate with more confidence, more accuracy, more clarity, and more awareness. If this sounds like something you want for yourself and your English, I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel right now. That way you don't miss a single new episode I post. And if you prefer to listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, just follow the show, again, in order not to miss a single new episode. Well, since the topic today is all about pronunciation and accents in English, I want to invite you to check out my pronunciation course as well, The Sounds of English. I created this course to teach you the main sounds of the English language, how to pronounce them correctly. That way, you can improve your pronunciation. And also, this course teaches you the main connected speech patterns that you hear native speakers using when they speak fast English in any type of media, movies, TV series, podcasts. So if you want to take a pronunciation and even accent to the next level, check out the pronunciation course. You can find the link here in the description of the video, in the pinned comment below as well. And if you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, just go to the show notes of this episode. All right? So let's start here with the first item on the agenda. The problem with the speak like a native narrative. Well, first of all, native from where? Let's start there. When you see people online saying how to speak English like a native, so-called teachers saying, I will teach you to speak English like a native. Okay, native from where? There are so many countries in the world that speak English as their first language. We have the US, of course, but we also have Canada, England, Scotland, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, and many other places that I left out here. So, first of all, we have to think about, okay, when you say speak English like a native, what do you mean? Native from where? And even if you narrow it down to the country, that's not enough. Let's say you say, okay, I want to speak English like an American. I want to learn the English from the US. Okay, fine. From what region in the US? People in New York City speak a certain way. People in California speak another way. People in the South, like Texas, for example, they sound another way. People from the Midwest, they also speak a certain way. So where from inside the US do you want to sound like? So that's the first problem I see, the lack of specificity when you say speak English like a native. All right? And as a learner, you should question this. Another problem I see with this narrative is that it promotes a bias towards certain accents of English, mainly American or British. So learners think that the correct English is only the American English or the British English, and that's it. But like I just said, there are so many variations, so many other countries that also speak English as their first language. and they don't sound particularly British or American. They have their own way of speaking English, their own sound, even though they are all native speakers of the English language. And another problem I see with this narrative is that I believe it can put unnecessary pressure on learners. And then you end up with a situation where you have a learner who already speaks English very well and who can already communicate very well, but they think they don't. They think their English is not good enough. They think that they can't speak English because they don't particularly sound American or British, for example, or they don't sound like a native, so they judge themselves and think that their English is not good, when in reality it is. All right? So these are some problems I see with this narrative, speak English like a native. But of course, if we are to have a more balanced discussion about this topic, we also have to look at the other side, which is the side of people who don't believe at all on accent work, accent reduction, pronunciation classes, people who say things like, don't worry about your accent. Don't worry about studying pronunciation so much. You know, your accent is your accent. People have to find a way to understand you. Yeah? As long as they can understand you and you can understand them, that's what matters. I also see some problems with this narrative. So look, the first problem I see with this narrative is that it encourages learners not to take their accent and pronunciation seriously. As a matter of fact, I've even met teachers who don't consider pronunciation relevant to be taught in class, or accent reduction, or anything of that nature. I have met teachers who told me that they never teach this stuff. They never teach pronunciation in their lessons. They never teach connected speech. Forget about it. They teach the grammar, they teach vocabulary, but that's it. That's a problem, in my view. I also believe that telling learners not to worry about how they sound in English, don't focus so much on pronunciation, don't worry about your accent in English, as long as you can communicate, that's fine. I think that that's a problem also because it gives the idea and it might encourage learners to think that lazy and sloppy speech is fine as long as people understand you. Let me give you a couple of brutal truths here, guys. All right? And I say this with no agenda. The first brutal truth: people judge other people. We all do. We judge others. Whether you want to admit it to yourself or not, whether this happens consciously for you or even subconsciously, you don't even realize it, we do that. When we first meet a person, the first 5 minutes we are talking to that person, we are consciously, sometimes even subconsciously, judging that person. We are judging how the person speaks, how the person sounds. We are judging the person's ideas, if they are coherent, if they make sense or not. We are judging the way the person looks even. We are judging. So that's the first brutal truth. The second brutal truth is first impressions matter. First impressions matter. Because you might never have a second chance again to create a good first impression on a key person that could help you tremendously in your life. All right? Now, I want to encourage you to look at your accent in English, how you speak English, and your pronunciation in English as your calling card. It's not the only thing people will pay attention to, but it is one of the things that people will be paying attention to when you first meet them, when you first talk to them in a job interview, when you are trying to make new friends, if you're trying to date someone. The way you sound, the way you speak is taken into consideration, and people judge that. All right? Now, a couple of other questions here for reflection. Think about your native language, okay? Don't even think about English at this point. Think about your native language and your native country. Imagine you need to hire a lawyer. Would you hire a lawyer in your native country who didn't speak properly? Who didn't speak your first language properly, who made lots of mistakes? I mean, I can imagine myself as a Brazilian who speaks Portuguese. If I had to hire a lawyer, I would want that lawyer to speak correctly, to speak well the Portuguese language. If a lawyer made lots of grammatical mistakes, pronounced the words in a weird way, that wouldn't pass a lot of credibility to me. All right? So think to yourself about that. Would you see a doctor who made a lot of mistakes when speaking, or who didn't have very good, clear pronunciation, communication skills? I find it hard because, like I said, the way you speak, the way you sound is part of your calling card, your personal brand. All right. And people judge that. So that's why I believe that it's dangerous to have this belief that you shouldn't worry about how you sound in English, because you might be hurting your chances of getting more opportunities because people are just judging you by the way you sound. And that's just the world. That's just how the world works. Yes, it ain't pretty, but that's the reality. All right. Another problem that I see with this narrative is that I believe it keeps learners trapped in their own progress, because many learners at some point they feel stuck with their progress. We even have the so-called intermediate plateau, right? But um, many times I find that if those learners who feel stuck focused more their efforts on improving their pronunciation and even smoothing out their non-native accent when speaking English a little bit, these learners would experience massive growth and progress. But I don't know, I guess it's just more convenient to tell learners not to worry about their accent, not to worry about their pronunciation. These things don't really matter for communication. And then you keep those learners there, kind of stuck and always needing you, always needing to watch your content, always needing to buy your courses. All right. So these are some problems I see with both narratives. Okay. The speak English like a native narrative versus the don't worry about your accent or pronunciation at all. Okay. Now let's go to the next item here, which is defining accent and pronunciation. What is the difference? What I did here was I wanted to test Gemini, and I asked Gemini to define these two words for me. And I really liked the definition that Gemini provided me with. As a matter of fact, it is what I would say had I not checked Gemini. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the definitions for you. Okay. So here is Gemini's response. Pronunciation first. Pronunciation refers to how individual sounds and words are spoken. It's about getting the sounds right, like the difference between cat and bat, or soup and soap. Think of it as the building blocks of spoken language. Everyone, even native speakers, has their own individual pronunciation quirks. So pronunciation is all about individual sounds, how you pronounce the individual sounds in a word. And I would even add here where you place the stress in a word. Because, for example, government sounds very different from government. All right. So I also view word stress as a pronunciation topic, something to be studied to improve pronunciation. Where you place the stress in the words. Are you placing them correctly? Now let's look at the definition for accent according to Gemini. Listen, accent refers to a broader pattern of pronunciation that is characteristic of a particular group of people, often based on region, nationality, or social group. It includes things like intonation, the rise and fall of the voice while speaking, stress, which syllables are emphasized in a word or a sentence, and rhythm, the timing and pacing of each speech or of the speech. All right. So your accent in English is influenced by a series of factors. Yes, it is influenced by your pronunciation knowledge and application. It is influenced by your connected speech knowledge and application, whether you know about connected speech and whether you apply connected speech in your sentences when you talk. But it's also influenced by your native country, where you come from, your native language. What is your first language? It's also influenced by your personality, who you are as a person, your background, your life experience, your history. So it's much deeper. Yeah, all these things, all your life experiences and background, they influence your accent in your native language and also in English. It's how you sound, how you speak, basically, as a whole. Now, Gemini gave us a really cool analogy here. I really liked this analogy, guys. Check it out. Imagine a song. Think about your favorite song. Pronunciation is like hitting the right notes. Everyone needs to hit the right notes to make the song recognizable. Now, accent is like the style or interpretation of the song. A rock band, a jazz singer, and a country artist might all sing the same song with different styles or accents, changing the overall feel, but keeping the core melody or the words intact. That's a really interesting analogy to illustrate that, to illustrate the difference, isn't it? So think of a Michael Jackson song. Now, three different artists can cover that song. Maybe Elton John can do it, AC/DC can do it, and Madonna can do it. The song will be the same. You will hear it and you will recognize it as, okay, that's a Michael Jackson song. But how the song will feel when you hear it, how the song will be dressed, let's say, each song, each version here, each version will have a different feel. All right. So accent for me is this. It's basically how you dress the words, how you dress your English to speak it. All right. It's much more broad, I think, than pronunciation. Pronunciation is something more laser focused, individual sounds, and word stress, I would say. Now let's take a look at the 4 different types of non-native accents you can have as an English learner. One of them is not ideal, in my opinion, and the other 3 are okay. All right? So the first one is what we call the heavy accent. This type of person who has a heavy accent when speaking English is a person who allows L1 or the person's first language to influence a lot the second language, to influence the English language in this case tremendously. So it's almost like you are speaking your native language in terms of tone, pace, intonation, but using English words. That's how I view it. Yeah. So the heavy accent to me is not ideal because most of the time that type of accent becomes unintelligible for people. All right. And then it's much harder for people to make sense of what you're saying. So ideally, you don't want to have a heavy accent when speaking English. You don't want your first language to heavily influence your second language, English. All right. Now, the other 3 types of accent, they are okay. They are called the slight accent, also the lightly foreign sounding accent, and finally the native-like accent. I look at slight accent and lightly foreign sounding accent as pretty much the same thing. They are very similar. Both of them are intelligible, so they are okay, meaning that people can understand you. So a person who has a slight accent when speaking English or a lightly foreign sounding accent when speaking English is that person that when you listen to the person, you know from the get-go that that person is not a native speaker of English. The person is not American, not British, not Irish. The person is not a native speaker. It's obvious from the get-go that person is a foreigner speaker of English. Okay? or a foreign speaker, excuse me. But that person communicates correctly and clearly enough that you are able to understand the person without any hiccups, no issues to understand the person. So, yes, you hear the accent, you detect the slight foreign accent there, but it doesn't interfere with the communication at all. That's great. That type of accent works wonders. Okay? It is intelligible. But we also have learners who achieve something called the native-like accent. Now, these learners, they have mastered their pronunciation and accents in English so much to such a high level that they might be able to trick some native speakers and people in general. And people might think that they are American or British or any other nationality that speaks English as a first language. All right. Even though they are not, even though they are non-native speakers of English. So there are learners like that. All right. But even for those learners who have what I call the native-like accent, if you talk to them for a longer period of time, for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, I think inevitably you will spot that they are non-native speakers of English. Yeah. If we talk for too long in a language that is not our first language, eventually we're going to let some things slip. We're going to say something that will let the other person know that, okay, you're not a native speaker of English, are you? But that's the difference pretty much. These native-like speakers of English are learners who have very good pronunciation skills and who have mastered their accent to such an extent that if you have quick interactions with them, like for just a few minutes or 5 minutes, they might easily pass as a native speaker of English. Okay? So all of these are okay, except the first one, heavy accent. So if you have a heavy accent when speaking English, you want to tone it down. You want to neutralize it a little bit. That's what I would recommend. Now, I think it would be cool here to give you some demonstrations. I selected here a few clips of famous people who are non-native speakers of English to illustrate what a slight or lightly foreign sounding accent sounds like and what a native-like accent sounds like. Okay, so let me get the files here now. So first I have here Arnold Schwarzenegger. All right, so he's from Austria. He's been living in the US for a very long time by now, and he speaks English very well. But listening to him, you can tell that he's not American. Yeah, because he has this slight accent still, this slight German accent or lightly foreign sounding accent. So let's listen to Arnold a little bit.
I remember that when he said, he says, you always say three. It's not three, it is three with TH. Yeah. So he had me say 3,333 and 1/3 with the T.
Nice, right? So what I want to point out here is that even though he clearly has a lightly foreign sounding accent, his English is great. He makes no mistakes when he's speaking, grammatically speaking, but also even if you narrow it down to pronunciation, his pronunciation is very good. You see the difference here? He has a slight accent. Yeah, he doesn't sound 100% American, but his pronunciation is very good. So good that he's able to pronounce the TH sound here without any problems.
TH and not with the S.
Very
right?
good.
Yeah, but I mean, after 5,000 years, right? after doing thousands of reps on it, and I remember we get confused with the F's and the V and the W. That we would say, this is a nice wine, but it's actually wine, right? So the guy had me say, a fine wine grows on a vine.
You see, very nice, right? The accent is there. We can hear it, but the English is great. Yeah. And the pronunciation is also great. Yeah. He's exemplifying here the difference between vine and wine, because I imagine in German, they tend to pronounce W as a V. Yeah. So instead of wine, they say vine. All right.
So now I ran around with that. Then for instance, he said to me, he says, Arnold, you have to also learn how to say the vibrating Z. We don't have that in German. So he said, the sink is made out of zinc.
Very nice. The sink is made out of zinc. So differentiating between the S sound and the Z sound. You see, so I think he's sharing here a story of when he started improving his English when he came to America. Yeah. And that's true. He says that, when he first arrived in America, his accent was really heavy. Yeah. So it was really heavy and hard for people to understand. But then he actually took lessons. He took accent reduction lessons. He learned more about English pronunciation. And nowadays, his English is great. You see, that is okay. The slight accent is there, but that's a type of accent that is intelligible. No mistakes here, grammatically speaking, good vocabulary use, and good pronunciation work as well. Now, let's look at another person that I brought here for us today, Penelope Cruz. Now, Penelope Cruz is from Spain. Let's listen to her.
I found an agent when I was 14, where she did say no to me 3 times. She sent me away. She said, "You are too young, and I'm not."
You see, from the get-go, you hear her speaking, and you can tell that she has this Hispanic type of accent when speaking English. But it's intelligible. It's clear. We have no problems understanding what she's saying.
Not getting more people this year. I'm still with her today. Her name is Katrina Bayonas. But she sent me away. I would come back and say, "No, I need you to represent me, and you'll see I will get the jobs. And let me do the castings." And
you see little things like castings instead of casting, right?
No, came back. No, she would ask me to do scenes from Casablanca. I said, "But why you ask me to do that if I'm 14? Let me improvise. Let me do something appropriate for my age." And the day that I did an improvisation about a woman that was very angry with somebody else, and it was me with her. And that day she told me, "I want to sign you. I want to work with you."
You see, very nice, right? So again, she's another example of a person who's not a native speaker of English, but who speaks English very well and very clearly in an intelligible way, even though she has this lightly foreign sounding accent. All right. Now I want to show you a couple of other examples here of what I would consider native-like accent. Those are the learners, the speakers who have perfected their pronunciation so much that they might just pass as a native speaker, as an American, for example, as we're going to check it out here. So the first person I have here to exemplify that and to illustrate that is Priyanka. So let's take a look at Priyanka's English here.
I'm from India, a country rich in culture, in music, in entertainment. So clearly the Jonas Brothers didn't make it over there.
You see, she's originally from India, but she has what I would consider a native-like accent. She can easily pass as an American, depending on the situation. If the person doesn't interact with her so much, easily.
Nick and I have a 10-year age gap.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. And there are many 90s pop culture references he doesn't understand, and I have to explain them to him, which is fun.
You see the connected speech she employs, he doesn't understand. He doesn't understand. He doesn't understand. This sounds very native-like, the connected speech knowledge and application she has.
And because we teach each other. We teach each other things. He showed me how to use TikTok.
You see, he showed me how to use. Very native-like. She doesn't say how to use, but she's employing connected speech here. How to use. He showed me how to use.
For example, and I showed him what a successful acting career looks like.
You see, so she's a good example, in my opinion, of a non-native speaker of English who has native-like English. And the last person we're going to look into now is a Brazilian actor called Rodrigo Santoro, or in Portuguese, we will call his name Rodrigo Santoro. All right, so let's quickly listen to his English here.
Is that what it is?
Like how your character's transformed.
Yeah, I think Alex stars out as, a happy man married with Holly. They just really get along really well, and they're just an amazing couple.
And see, he's Brazilian, but his English sounds very native-like to me.
And he's having fun. He's having a great time. And
you see, a great time. Yeah, this this airy T that the English language has. It's such a nuance, such a detail. Yeah, he doesn't say time, for example, a great time. He goes time. And also the way he places his voice sounds very native-like. Yeah, he doesn't speak here up front. He speaks here because, the English language, guys, especially American English, I would say, is very controlled by the jaw, right? So, we can see that he places his voice more in the jaw to have this native-like sounding English.
But all of a sudden, Holly
You see,
just
all of a sudden, the reduction there.
decides that they have to adopt a baby because time has come. I think they wanted to have a baby before and it didn't work out. But now she's kind of like feeling that she's really ready for it. But he doesn't. He isn't just not
He can
so.
wait. He loves.
You see, so that's it. So again, probably if you talk to him or if you listen to him for longer, you will see that, okay, he's not really an American. But at first glance, sounds very native-like. So now let's take a look at the problem with having a heavy accent. All these speakers I showed you now, they don't have heavy accents when they speak English. They either have a native-like type of accent or a slight foreign-sounding type of accent, but all of them speak English very well, very clearly and confidently, okay? Now, the problem with having heavy accent, first of all, I would say it hinders communication. It hurts communication. A conversation doesn't flow as smoothly as it could if you have an accent in English that's just too strong, okay? Also, usually when you talk to a person who speaks English with a very heavy accent, you have to strain to understand what the person is saying or to try to understand what the person is saying. When you strain, you make this unnecessary extra effort to really see if you can understand what the person is trying to say. All right. And this is really bad because if people have this when they talk to you, they might end up focusing more on how you speak, on your accent per se, than on your message. So without warning, you might, if you have an accent that is just too heavy, you might just get people distracted and they'll be paying attention to your accent and not to your message. And ideally, you want them to pay attention to your message, to what you have to say. All right. And I would also say that having an accent in English that is just too heavy, like a heavy foreign accent, makes you lose opportunities as well. Because if you can't communicate clearly, that will limit your opportunities. Great, clear communication is key for success. All successful people tend to be great communicators. Going back to what I said earlier about the first impression, people judging you the first time you meet them, all right? If you have an accent that is too heavy when you speak English, that makes it hard for the person to speak with you, that will affect the opportunities you're going to be presented to in life, the networking opportunities, the business opportunities, professional opportunities, all right? And guys, I can attest to that myself. I know for a fact that the way I sound in English, my pronunciation skills in English, the way I sound overall has played a significant role in some of the opportunities I've had in my life, professionally speaking. Sometimes I wonder if I had a heavier type of accent speaking English, if I would have had the same opportunities I did. And even nowadays, you are watching me now, you are listening to me, right? You know that I'm not American. I'm not a native speaker. I am Brazilian. Yeah? So why do you listen to me then? Why do you watch me week in, week out? Maybe part of it has to do with the way I speak, with how I sound. Maybe if I had a heavier Brazilian accent, maybe I wouldn't have as many followers or people wouldn't follow the channel as much. Again, I'm not saying that this is bad. It's just how it is. It's just reality, how the world works. All right? I'm not talking about what the ideal situation would be. I'm talking about what is. All right? So I really believe that if you have a heavy accent when speaking English, a heavy foreign accent, you should work on that. My pronunciation course can definitely help you with this, pronunciation-wise and connected speech-wise, because, the focus is not to speak like a native speaker. That's not the focus, all right? You don't have to do that. You can keep your identity. You can keep your foreign accent, but you have to sound intelligible. Yeah. And if you have an accent that is just too heavy, you won't sound intelligible to people. Now, to close, I want to give you here some quick tips to improve your pronunciation and accent. All right. First, I want to give you some questions for reflection. So think about these questions. Why am I studying English? How do I feel about people from English speaking countries? This is a good one, guys, because, if you don't relate to a country's culture very much, you might not want to sound like the people from that culture. So think about that. Do I like the accent displayed on the audio material my teacher uses? On the movies I watch? On the podcasts I listen to? Do I like this kind of English? How does that kind of English sound to me? Does it sound good? It's a matter of preference. Would I like to sound like a native speaker of English? I'm telling you that you don't have to, but I know that some people want to. So you should reflect on that. Do you want to do it? And if you do want to do it, why do you want to do it? All right. And what does it even mean? What does it mean to speak with a native accent? How much of my identity would be lost if I started sounding like an American or British person? That's another question for you to think about. Because some people might just not want to lose their identity so much and sounding like an American or a British person. They want to sound like themselves. Yeah. They want to sound like a person who was born in their own country. That's fine. So if that's your case, focus on intelligibility. Work on your pronunciation, individual sounds, and speak in a way that is clear to people. All right. Now, other people, on the other hand, I think they're more flexible with this stuff. I certainly am. I'm not so attached to my Brazilian identity so that, I'm not going to improve my pronunciation or accent in English, or, change it a little bit. Yeah. So I never had that myself. So I was always more open to, learning different sounds, learning different ways to use my mouth to really produce the sounds that, let's say, American English requires. But that's a personal choice. All right. I would also recommend you have a clear reason for improving your pronunciation. I believe that whether you want to sound more native-like or not, maybe you don't want to sound more native-like, you want to keep having your slight accent, it doesn't matter. For both types of people here, you need to work on pronunciation. Pronunciation is key for both, okay? Now, accent reduction, accent work, maybe connected speech, might be more interesting for people who want to have a native-like type of accent. But in both scenarios here, pronunciation is important. So here are some examples of clear reasons or goals you can set when it comes to pronunciation. For example, I want to improve my pronunciation because I like English very much and think good pronunciation is important. That's my case, for example. I need to sound good enough to travel and to participate in informal conversations. For some people, that's a strong reason. I want to feel comfortable in video conferences, phone calls, and business meetings. I have many students who are in that situation, usually professionals who already work. I give academic lectures or some sort of other formal presentations in English, and I want to be judged by my content, not by the way I speak. That's a good reason, isn't it? I want to be judged by my content, not by the way I speak. Now, you could argue with me. You could say, Thiago, but the problem is not me. The problem is the other people. Other people need to be more tolerant of my accent or more open. Well, let's say that yes, ideally, that's the ideal scenario, But what I'm trying to do in this episode is just give you the reality. And the reality is many people judge you by the way you sound. So do you want to be judged by your content or by the way you speak? I'm not talking about the ideal scenario here. I'm talking about reality. What is? All right. So you have to think for yourself about that and make your own decision. All right. about how far you want to take your pronunciation and accent in English. And here's another reason that I included. I want to improve my pronunciation because I am or want to be an English teacher, and I want to attain native-like proficiency, which is also my case, right? I mean, I realize that, okay, if I'm going to be an English teacher, if I'm going to pursue this career, if I'm going to teach other people how to speak English well, I need to speak English well myself. I need to have good pronunciation. I need to have a more native-like type of accent. That's me, okay? That's my view on this matter. Because again, it's like your calling card. In my case, my pronunciation in English is not just my calling card. It's the very thing I work with every day. I work with English every day. So why wouldn't I worry about, being the best I can be at that, like doing my best. I would also recommend having tons of exposure to spoken English. If you want to significantly improve your connected speech knowledge, your pronunciation, and even your accent, have tons of exposure, because exposure is a determining factor for pronunciation improvement. If you only have classes once or twice a week with your teacher at your language school, and then the rest of the days you just listen to all things in your native language, that's not going to help you very much. You need tons of exposure to really improve your pronunciation. I would also recommend being willing to take risks, sharing your thoughts in the classroom or in meetings, for example, trying to imitate the sounds native speakers make when you talk to them. All right. So I find that some people don't want to improve their pronunciation, or they struggle with it because they're too shy, or they are afraid of taking risks. They are afraid of looking silly or looking stupid. And inevitably, if you are trying to improve your pronunciation, you will have to learn some articulations and some sounds that at first will make you feel kind of silly, kind of stupid, like the TH. Maybe if you've never done the TH in your life, when you start learning English, when you go that you learn that you have to go th or the, you're going to feel kind of funny at first, but you have to do it. Also remember that change comes from you. Change comes from you. So change comes from the individual. So you have to want to change it. All right? You have to want to better your pronunciation and even to better your accent. If you don't want it, if you don't really want it, no course, no teacher, no content is going to help you. All right? Also, remember that research has shown that motivation is a much stronger factor than natural ability. All right? So that's why it comes from you. You really have to want it. I would also say develop self-monitoring. Self-monitoring. Raise your awareness of how things are supposed to sound. Self-monitoring is another factor for success. I find that learners who become very good English speakers are the ones who are able to self-monitor, meaning that if they say something wrong or inaccurate, they are able to spot that either at the time or later if they watch a recording of themselves and they go, oh my God, I made that mistake. They realize that. So self-monitoring is key for successful learning. And I would also recommend studying the nitty-gritty aspects of pronunciation, obviously. All right. So after going through all these questions for reflection, having a clear goal, a clear reason for improving your pronunciation, you have to get down to business by studying the individual sounds, taking the time to learn and study the individual sounds of the English language, and also the main connected speech patterns that native speakers use in speech. My course can help you with that if you are interested, by the way. So now, to conclude this topic, let me just give you some final words here. Remember, taking the time to improve your pronunciation and overall accent in English is a personal decision that you need to make. While I believe having a heavy accent is not ideal, how far you want to take your pronunciation in English, and accent even, is up to you. At the very least, focus on speaking clearly, and take responsibility if someone can't understand you. That's a big one too. When we talk to a person and the person doesn't understand us, maybe our tendency is to blame the other person. Oh, you are not tolerant of my native accent, or you can't understand me. The problem is on you. No. Take responsibility for your own English, your own pronunciation, how you sound. If somebody doesn't understand you, take that on you. Like, oh, maybe it's the way I'm saying something or communicating that is not clear enough. How can I be more clear? How can I get better at this? All right. Remember that communication is a two-way street. And if there is any hiccup in the conversation, both people involved are equally responsible. Have a clear reason for your learning goals and be specific in what you want to achieve. Remember, taking the time to improve your pronunciation and overall accent will not only help you understand others, but also help you be understood. And I would add, have some really cool opportunities along the way. All right? So now to close the episode, it's time for the Learner's Corner. For the Learner's Corner, we have an audio message here from a Brazilian named Hiene Fernandes. So let's see what Hiene has to share here with us.
Hi, Thiago. How's it going? My name is Hiene Fernandes from Brazil. And like you, I never had the opportunity to study English out of Brazil. I never spend money with course because my parents, they don't have much money when I young. So I study English by myself as a self-taught for a long time, specifically for many years. And everything that I know and that I learned was alone. And your podcast is amazing because help us to improve our English a lot. There are many difference when I start to listen in your podcast and improve my skills and abilities to speaking and mainly to listening better. I think is the way. So thanks a lot to improve English and how can I say and share acknowledgement for people with that we don't have the opportunity to speak English out of Brazil. Thanks a lot.
Nice, Hiene. Thank you for the message. I really appreciate the support and great job. I mean, if that's how you sound in English and you've never taken a formal course, you've never taken classes, that's awesome, So only being self-taught, you've already gotten to this level, that's great. If I can give you a recommendation here, I know it can be expensive, like buying a course or enrolling at a school or even getting a private teacher. I know that, but also look at that as an investment, not as an expense, okay? Because even though you can be a very good self-taught learner, at some point in your journey, I really believe that some guidance can help you, especially if you want to get to higher levels of proficiency, So if possible, I would recommend planning to invest in a teacher, in classes, in a formal course, because that's going to help you, first of all, fix some of these mistakes you still make when you speak. And also it will guide you on the things you have to do to get to a B2 level and then eventually a C1 level if you want that. All right. But thank you so much for the message. I really appreciate that. Guys, if you want to do it just like Hiene, you can send me another message by going to speakpipe.com/EnglishWithThiago, or you can also write me an email at hello.teacherthiago@gmail.com. Don't forget to check out my pronunciation course, and all the links you need are here in the description of the video and in the pinned comment below. And let me know here in the comment section what you thought about today's topic and today's episode. What is your opinion about this, about speaking English like a native, about working on your pronunciation, working on your accent? What is your experience with that? So feel free to share. I find that this, while controversial, is mostly a personal topic. Yeah, a personal matter. Yeah, it's about your preferences, really. But I'm curious to know what you guys think about that. So write your comments here in the section below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well. This helps me tremendously here. Share this episode, this video with a friend, because that also helps me a lot. And thank you so much, guys, for listening today, for tuning in. I'm Thiago. I'm signing off, and I'll be talking to you very soon in the upcoming episode. Bye-bye.